The metallic snap of bolt cutters biting through my security chain echoed through perfect suburban silence like gunshots. That sound was the moment Bethany Kensington Wright went from HOA president to federal felon in 30 seconds. While I was deployed overseas fighting drug cartels, this power-hungry suburban dictator decided my eyesore vehicle needed to disappear. What she didn't know, that Jeep belonged to a federal drug task force, was loaded with $347,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment, and I'm the kind of federal agent who specializes in taking down criminal organizations. She thought she was stealing some soldier's truck. She actually committed federal crimes that would make cartel bosses jealous. My name is Marcus Tank Rodriguez, and 3 months ago, I thought inheriting my grandmother's house would be a blessing. Boy, was I wrong. Willowbrook Estates, picture-perfect suburban hell where every house is the same shade of beige. Sprinkler systems hiss on automated schedules, and the smell of fresh mulch can't mask the stench of entitlement. HOA dues, $150 a month for community standards. Translation: paying some power-hungry Karen to make your life miserable. I'm Army Reserve MP, recently accepted into a federal drug task force. Grandma Rose's house was supposed to be my safety net. Rent it out during deployment, build equity, honor the woman who raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 12. That house still smells like her homemade tortillas and coffee. Every creaky floorboard holds memories of her teaching me right from wrong. Mijo, she'd say, you stand up to bullies, but you do it the right way. Enter Bethany Kensington Wright. Picture a 52-year-old real estate agent who drives a white Lexus SUV and measures grass height with an actual ruler. 7 years as HOA president has turned her into a suburban dictator. Her husband Carl sits on city council, making her feel untouchable. This woman sends violation notices for Christmas lights in January. 2 weeks into my deployment, the email hits my inbox. Violation notice. Unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep Wrangler, clearly marked with federal law enforcement decals, was apparently an eyesore. Bethany's interpretation of HOA covenants: work vehicles prohibited in residential driveways. Here's what she didn't know. That Jeep contains $347,000 worth of surveillance equipment for active cartel investigations. GPS trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras, federal property that requires department authorization to relocate. The fine, $50 per day, accumulating while I'm dodging bullets overseas. My sister Maya, sweet middle school teacher Maya, tried reasoning with this suburban tyrant. She drove over to explain I was deployed, showed copies of my orders, even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. Rules are rules, Bethany snapped, looking down at Maya like she was a bug. If your brother cannot follow simple community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for your family. That phone call from Maya still echoes in my head, the sound of her voice cracking as she sat in Grandma's kitchen. Tank, she threatened to put a lien on the house. She said Carl knows people at the school district, that supporting you could affect my job. Maya discovered the pattern. The Johnsons, he's a Marine, got cited for his motorcycle being excessively loud. Sarah Martinez, Navy wife with a deployed husband, was fined for garden gnomes being unprofessional. Every military family in Willowbrook was getting targeted. But here's the kicker: Bethany's violations were made up. Maya checked the actual HOA bylaws buried in my grandmother's papers, signed when she bought the house in 1987. Government vehicles were specifically exempted. Emergency services, military, law enforcement, all protected. Bethany was literally fabricating rules, counting on residents being too intimidated or ignorant to check. The community lived in fear. Neighbors whispered over fences but wouldn't speak publicly. Bethany had created a climate where questioning her authority meant becoming her next target. Carl's political connections made opposition seem futile. That's when I realized what I was really dealing with. This wasn't about parking or property values. This was organized harassment of military families by a corrupt HOA board with political protection. Bethany's next move came 48 hours later: pure suburban warfare. A registered letter hit Maya's mailbox demanding immediate vehicle removal or emergency towing within 24 hours. The letter was carbon copied to Carl's city council office and the local police, citing immediate health and safety violations and emergency neighborhood degradation. Complete fiction, but wrapped in official letterhead with legal-sounding language designed to intimidate. Maya called me from Grandma's kitchen, panic mixing with the familiar creak of those old floorboards. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver keeps looking at your Jeep like he's sizing it up." That's when I unleashed my first counterpunch. I contacted JAG, Judge Advocate General military lawyers who specialize in eating constitutional violations for breakfast. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams took one look at my case file, and her expression went from professional interest to righteous fury. "Rodriguez, this woman just threatened to steal federal law enforcement property. That's not an HOA violation. That's a federal felony. The Service Members Civil Relief Act doesn't just protect military personnel from contract disputes. It specifically prohibits harassment of deployed service members' property. But more importantly, my Jeep isn't just my vehicle. It's federal law enforcement equipment owned by the United States government." Williams immediately filed a formal complaint with Base Command, triggering a federal military liaison review. Suddenly, Bethany's little power trip was on the radar of people with actual authority. Maya started digging through Grandma's old HOA documents, and buried in a stack of meeting minutes from 2019, she found a smoking gun. A letter from Bethany to the City Planning Commission recommending against military housing assistance programs in Willowbrook because transient military populations don't maintain long-term community investment standards. Translation: she'd been trying to keep military families out of our neighborhood for years. The HOA financial records revealed systematic embezzlement. Over 3 years, $184,000 in community funds had been diverted to Carl's development company through fabricated consulting contracts and community improvement projects that never existed. But here's the revelation that changed everything. Maya showed me violation notices sent to Grandma during her final hospice weeks. Citations for property maintenance failures and threats of legal action against a dying woman who couldn't even get out of bed. The stress of fighting these fake violations caused her blood pressure to spike every time one arrived. The hospice nurse said she kept asking if we'd lose the house. Bethany's desperation reached critical mass at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and Maya's security camera caught every federal crime in high definition. The sound I'll never forget: clang, clang, clang. Bolt cutters biting through my security chain, each metallic snap echoing through suburban morning silence like gunshots. Through Maya's phone camera, I watched Bethany Kensington Wright commit multiple federal felonies in real time. Hair disheveled, still in her bathrobe, she'd hired Discount Dave's Towing with cash. No paperwork, no questions, and was frantically directing them to load federal law enforcement property onto their flatbed. The tow truck driver took one look at the federal task force decals and started backing away like the vehicle was radioactive. "Lady, this is government property with federal markings. I ain't touching this for any amount of money. It's abandoned property," Bethany screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "I'm HOA president with legal authority to remove community violations." That statement, captured on 3 different security cameras, just became Exhibit A in a federal theft case. My counterpunch was swift and devastating. I immediately contacted Captain Chun through emergency channels, triggering protocols for theft of federal law enforcement equipment. Within minutes, federal marshals were dispatched with lights and sirens to my grandmother's address. The community uprising began when Mrs. Patterson witnessed Bethany's public breakdown from her front window. This sweet elderly woman who'd survived the Great Depression and buried 2 military sons wasn't about to watch some HOA Karen terrorize a deployed soldier's family. She called every neighbor, every veteran in Willowbrook, every decent person who'd been silently suffering under Bethany's reign of suburban terror. By 10 a.m., my grandmother's house was surrounded by protective neighbors forming a human shield around federal property. "This stops right here, right now," declared Tom Henderson, 72-year-old Vietnam vet whose own son had done 3 tours in Afghanistan. "You want that boy's vehicle, you go through 30 American veterans first." The breaking point came when federal marshals arrived at Willowbrook Estates and discovered Bethany had changed the community gate locks, preventing federal agents from accessing their own stolen property. That's obstruction of federal justice. Marshal Jennifer Torres, a no-nonsense federal agent who'd arrested cartel bosses and domestic terrorists, took one look at the locked gate and her expression shifted from professional courtesy to predatory focus. "Ma'am, you've obstructed federal agents investigating theft of government property. Open this gate immediately or face additional federal charges." Bethany's response sealed her fate forever. "I don't recognize federal authority over private HOA property. You people have no jurisdiction in my community." She just declared war on the United States government while standing in her bathrobe. Game over. 18 months later, justice was served the right way. Bethany received 8 years in federal prison with no parole, plus $647,000 in restitution to affected families. The federal judge's words became legendary in legal circles. "Your systematic harassment of military families represents domestic terrorism disguised as community governance. This court will not tolerate suburban tyranny." Carl got 6 years and lifetime prohibition from public office. His development empire collapsed completely with $3.2 million in community settlements, ensuring that every family they'd harassed received compensation for years of suffering. The real victory was watching our neighborhood transform from a place of fear into a community that protects its own. Maya revolutionized HOA governance as the democratically elected president, implementing bylaws that became the national model for military family protection. Today, the Veteran Memorial Park sits where Bethany's house once stood, seized through federal asset forfeiture and transformed by community vote. Children now play on swings where suburban tyranny once lived, their laughter echoing across grass that grows freely without ruler measurements. This is what victory tastes like: justice served, community healed, and the knowledge that bullies can be defeated when good people organize and fight back.